Okay, so my name is Megan Merchant, and I want to advocate for a raise in the federal minimum wage. And so I feel personally connected to this because my first job I was paid minimum wage, and it felt like I shouldn't even I wasn't making any money at all. It seemed as if I would spend just as much money on gas to get there and lunch while I was working, and so I was making barely anything for all the work I was doing. And so one of my neighbors here at my college house, she has six kids and she works I think she works at McDonald's, I'm not sure, but she works for minimum wage. And she always is telling me, complaining about how she doesn't have enough money to support her family and just all that kind of stuff. And she is on welfare, and she talks about how if she were able to make more money with her job, then she feels like she wouldn't necessarily have to be on welfare. And that's something to really think about because we're paying for welfare with our tax money, taxpayer dollars. And so if we increase minimum wage, or sorry, if we increase minimum wage nationally, it would use less taxpayer dollars, and we would get more out of what we need with our taxpayer dollars for roads and schools and that kind of stuff. So according to the House Committee on Education and Labor, raising the federal minimum wage will also stimulate consumer spending, help businesses' bottom lines, grow the economy. A modest increase would improve worker productivity, reduce employer turnover and absenteeism. It would also boost the overall economy by generating increased consumer demand. So with that, that's just meaning overall it would boost our economy, just like we were talking about with the whole legalization of marijuana. There'd be more spending. If you have more money, then you can spend more money also. So that would be great for our economy because we could use it. And another reason why is, according to Investopedia, without the minimum wage, that can keep up with the cost of living, or this minimum wage cannot keep up with the cost of living. So if we increase it, it will be beneficial for everyone who is financially supported by minimum wage, because they need an increase in order to keep up with the cost of living nowadays. Inflation has gone up, and the last time it was adjusted, the minimum wage standard was adjusted, was in 2009. And so since then, we're almost at 2020. And so that's been quite some time. Inflation's gone up, the cost of living has gone up. People are unable to meet their financial stability, and they can't even afford to retire nowadays because they don't have the money to. Also, the current minimum wage is 14.8% less than when it was adjusted, as I was talking about, in 2009. And so that's considering inflation. So 14.8% less is quite a bit less. And the cost of living has gone up. Everything coming together makes it unlivable to support a family off of minimum wage. You can barely support yourself off that, especially if you have kids, you're married, that kind of stuff. It just gets worse. Going off that, this source, Economic Policy Institute, predicts that raising the minimum wage to $15 would gradually would lift wages of 28.1 workers, and another 11.6 workers would secondhandly benefit that. So that's just with all the spending. Like I was talking about boosting the economy, the 11.6 are people that wouldn't be directly benefited through this increase, but would secondhandly benefit through the increase in spending and the economy. They also predict that a majority of workers would be around people in the younger age, 25 to 35. And these are people that are just getting out, maybe getting out of college, or just getting on their feet, financially responsible for themselves. And this can start a line of credit, and people getting credit and they get debt with that. There's just so many reasons why at a younger age you need to be financially responsible and be able to have the money to financially support yourself, because if you don't, it just starts a whole long process of having bad credit and just being in trouble financially for a very long time. And so if this would benefit the younger generation, as it's predicted to, it'd be very, very beneficial. It's also predicted to benefit minorities more, which would be great. Um, so because of all the higher cost of living and all of the inflation that's gone on, there's a huge, huge gap in between the top and bottom classes. On average, they say a CEO makes about 13 billion, while a minimum wage worker makes 15,000 per year. This is a gap of 924 to 1, which is huge, and it just shows the reason why we need to try to bring the lower level up higher and get some kind of less of a gap there. And another source, according to Politics of Poverty, we pretty much, like I was touched on this earlier, we pay the gap in the minimum wage somehow through the government funded programs like welfare. They're funded by taxpayer dollars. So if you can't afford to live off of the minimum wage, then you're going to apply for welfare, and we're all going to end up paying the difference anyways. So when employers don't pay enough to survive, these workers are compelled to seek government assistance, meaning taxpayers are essentially subsidizing the corporations. So that's just another reason why we should increase minimum wage. And that's it.
So when you were doing this, did you figure out like an amount of like how much it would have to increase to make up for all the years and the cost of living?
No, there's no like set amount in like the research, but a lot of people, like most of the topic of conversation, like some states are already boosting their state by state level minimum wage. But right now it's looking at like $15 per hour is what most people are pushing for, as they think they could live much better off with that. It's a huge boost. It goes from like 300 a month to like 60 or 600 a month, which would financially change someone's life quite a bit because it's double. Minimum wage is 7.25, I think now. So it'd be a huge increase.
Do you think that minimum wage should be different based on where you live? Because like I know some jobs you'll be doing the same job, say in New York City versus in South Carolina, you're going to be making more in New York City just because the cost of living's more up there and stuff. Do you think that if they were to raise it, they should raise it differently in New York, somewhere like that, than here?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good point. So like right now, the like national is 7.25. But like per state, like I think New York might be 11. And so that's like there's like, they have rules like that. And I think even if the federal increases the state by state or like, whatever economy, like everyone will know they should also increase with it, considering the cost of living is higher. Like I think Chicago is something like, I can't even remember what it was, but it's all higher in like certain like big cities and like states have a lot of big cities and stuff like that. So people like they do
Where, like
think
the cost of living is more.
What's that?
Where the cost of living tends to be a little higher.
Yeah.
At the bigger outcome.
And it's not a federally established thing, but like states do consider it. And the federal government probably should consider it as well, but it's hard to say you have to pay this and then you only have to pay this, So it's kind of a state by state rule typically.
You look into the minimum wage of like tipped occupations and how their minimum wages are lower. I mean, coming from Maryland, it was 2 summers ago, it was like 10 an hour. But then when you got tipped as a waiter, I made like $3.25 an hour plus tips. Like, do you know how that would adjust along the scales?
Like as a waiter's salary?
Yeah, I mean, their minimum wage would go up as everyone else's minimum wage goes up, or does it
I feel
stay
like
the
you just go
same?
by the percent that it goes up. You know what I mean? So if they
Yeah,
increase
like a
minimum wage.
percentage of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's because I was a waitress the past couple of summers too. And I think I made like $2 an hour or something like that. And like that also varies because some like tips are taxed and some people's aren't, depending on your like, they have under the table stuff at certain restaurants. I don't know. So that all varies, but I think it would just go up by the same percent. I think that makes the most sense.
Mhm.
So So if like minimum wage is increased to, let's say, like $15, wouldn't that in turn there would be like the prices of things would go up because like when someone's getting paid more, the value of money is a little bit less. And what if this minimum wage goes up? What about the people that were getting paid like $15 an hour? They're not at, like, for whatever job they're doing, they're not at minimum wage. Would their would, like, I think what I'm asking is, wouldn't everyone's salary increase, and because of that it would literally kind of zero it out in a way, just
Yeah.
because like consumer prices would go up?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but like that's why minimum wage is adjusted periodically because of inflation. And yes, it does cause inflation, but we've already inflated, like our economy has already been like keeps inflating, and it just isn't like financially reasonable to have a $7 like living off of that. So I think what pretty much has to happen is it just has to keep getting adjusted and adjusted, which is kind of a pain, but I feel like that's just the only way to solve that.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think like especially like I've worked a bunch of like minimum wage jobs, and it's definitely like sucked, especially like being in college and having to like spend your own money and being out on your own. But especially like if you think there are actually a lot of families that have like both parents depend on minimum wage jobs. So I guess like do you think that even if it was, say, like to be raised to $15, like if both, or if it's just like a one parent income household, do you still feel like 15 would like be enough?
I mean, probably not, but it's
It's still better.
yeah, it's better. I mean,
Yeah, but like
it would still break the gap a little bit. Like you may not need as much government subsidizing, like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So
that's
you wouldn't rely so much on like everyone else, because right now all of that's paid for by taxpayers. So it would kind of lessen the gap, I guess, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I didn't even think about how that would affect like the government funding. That is true.
So if all of our taxpayer dollars, like if we're spending less taxpayer dollars on welfare and things of that sort, then we can increase our roads, increase schools, like it goes to other stuff, which would be more beneficial for us as a whole. So yeah. Anyone else? All right.